3.5 V6 240 horsepower, VQ35DA. Renault Laguna 3 was equipped mainly with 4-cylinder engines, but there are two V6s in the engine range. The largest of them is the 3.5-liter engine from Nissan. But you can only meet him in a coupe, 3.0 DC V6 230 horsepower, V9X. The second V6 is diesel, with a volume of 3.0 liters. This is a joint development of Renault and Nissan. We won't dwell on them for long. The gasoline engine is good and reliable in Japanese style. But it's better to avoid the diesel V6 engine, bearings, chains. It has problems with these. 1.5 DC 110 horsepower, K9K. Most often, Renault Laguna 3 is found with a 1.5-liter turbo diesel. This motor is good for everyone and is known in almost any car service center. Of course, it is better to take a more recent restyled Laguna with this engine, but in principle there is no big difference in terms of reliability. This will be an engine with Siemens fuel equipment. We have a very detailed review of this turbo diesel where you can literally learn everything about it. Now let's say that you need to monitor oil leaks and even fuel emissions from the regulator on the injection pump. By the way, often the fuel flow regulator, A2C59506225, on the fuel injection pump becomes the reason for poor engines starting when hot. The original valve costs about $120, and it will last more than 200,000 kilometers. The Siemens piezo injectors for this motor, 8,200,380,253, are not very repairable. Used ears cost $100, and new ones cost $400. The problem with turning the liners worries few people anymore. But you need to know when the previous owner changed them and how long they ran. In principle, if you change the oil every 10,000 kilometers, you don't have to worry about wear of the liners. Replacing connecting rod bearings is no more difficult and no more expensive than replacing a timing belt in terms of labor and money. Don't forget to change the timing belt. And if the opportunity arises, it's still worth measuring the thermal clearances of the valves. The 1.5 DC engine simply does not have hydraulic compensators. With a mileage of more than 400,000 kilometers, it is worth paying attention to this issue. 2.0 DC 130, 150, 173 horsepower, M9R. The 2-liter turbo diesel is definitely more powerful, smoother and simply more modern. Although it has a cast-iron cylinder block and a timing chain drive, 16 valves in the presence of hydraulic compensators. We can also safely recommend this engine. There is absolutely nothing wrong with it. The Bosch fuel system is even more attractive in terms of maintainability. True, to inspect or replace the connecting rod bearings or to replace the timing chain, and this will have to be encountered with a mileage of more than 300,000 kilometers, you will have to remove the engine from under the hood. The share of petrol Renault Laguna 3 is very small. There are about 15% of such versions. 1.6 MPI 110 horsepower, K4M. The base petrol unit is the 1.6-liter K4M engine. This is an extremely simple engine and also durable and reliable. According to the French tradition, it quite willingly and abundantly leaks oil onto the gaskets, and if it bothers you, it's only over small things. However, a broken timing belt can kill it. 2.0 MPI 140 horsepower, M4R. The 2-liter naturally aspirated engine under the hood of the Laguna 3 is the brainchild of Nissan engineers. This engine has a timing chain drive, which requires maintenance every 150,000 kilometers. There are no hydraulic compensators in the valve drive. To replace spark plugs or ignition coils, you need to remove the intake manifold. In this case, you can mess up. Allow dust and sand to get from the surface of the engine into the spark plug wells. And tightening the spark plugs with excessive torque leads to the appearance of cracks in the cylinder head. In addition, the M4 engine is very hot, so it is imperative to keep the radiators clean and use high-quality antifreeze and a thermostat. The oil should be changed at least once every 10,000 kilometers. M4R engines often run with stuck and coked piston rings and, accordingly, readily consume oil. 2.0 turbo 170, 205 horsepower, F4R. Sometimes Renault Laguna 3 can be found with a 2-liter turbo engine. This is a glorious F4R, roughly speaking, the same engine as on the Duster, only with a turbine. And this engine is good. Renault fans appreciate it. There is less hassle with it than with a 2-liter Japanese naturally aspirated engine. Jatco JF613 6-speed automatic transmission. The third Laguna was lucky with the automatic transmission. It got the reliable Jatco JF613 unit. It has an excellent resource, 300,000 kilometers or more. Of course, provided that the ATF is updated every 50,000 kilometers. Not all owners like the thoughtful settings of this automatic. so there have been proposals to reflash it in order to speed up responses and switching. Even in this accelerated version, the Jatco transmission lasts longer. The air conditioning compressor on the third Laguna is rather weak. This applies to any of its variants, both for engines with a working volume of up to 2 liters and more. With runs ranging from 150 to 200,000 kilometers, these compressors leaked at the seal or simply jammed with cracking of the housing. Often repairs were impractical. The cost of a new compressor, of course, is off the charts. But good compressors from auto wrecking yards help out. Renault Laguna 3 engine mounts last more than 200,000 kilometers. As their rubber dampers crack, vibrations and shocks appear when changing gears. The upper support 113560001R costs up to $50, and the lower support 546190005R costs up to $150. Renault Laguna 3 with a 2-liter diesel engine and gasoline engines is equipped with a hydraulic power steering, the pump of which is driven by an attachment belt. In other versions, the power steering pump is driven by an electric motor. In both cases, the steering racks are hydraulic. The electric power steering pump and reservoir are located behind the front left wheel locker. To fill it, a special and inexpensive oil is used. It should be changed every 50,000 kilometers. There is nothing complicated about the replacement, except that it is advisable to lift the car, remove the left wheel and locker, and clean everything from dirt. And then, while the pump is running, you can bleed off the old oil through the return hose and at the same time add fresh oil. The steering rack is not a problem. Usually if a knock appears in the rack on the left side, then replacing the cracker that presses the rack to the worm gear helps. Many versions of the Renault Laguna 3 were equipped with an electric parking brake. It is based on a servo drive 360100002N with a single motor and gearbox. This servo pulls a pair of cables that supply the brake pads. A whole range of troubles happen with this mechanism, from a burnt-out relay and electric motor, to stretched and broken cables. But the cables themselves can be inexpensively purchased as non-original ones. You can also buy a relay and even an electric motor, either from China or from local electrical goods stores. The cables of a conventional handbrake also need to be looked after. Change them in time, as the brake wears out or stretches. The richest versions of the third-generation Laguna are equipped with a fully controlled 4-control chassis. Such cars have a hefty actuator from ISIN 521530001R installed on the rear beam, which is connected through 2 rods 551110001R and 551100001R to the steering knuckles 430190024R of the rear wheels. With the help of an actuator, the toe and angles of the rear wheels change by a couple of degrees. They seem to deviate to the left or right synchronously with the steering wheel turn. At low speeds, this improves maneuverability by reducing the turning radius. At highway speeds, the rear wheels turn in the same direction as the front wheels, which improves handling. It's nice that this system is extremely simple and reliable. With enormous mileage, the silent blocks in the rods may crack, the ball pins may become loose, they will travel 500,000 kilometers before they are replaced. If a knock appears from behind, its source can be found in the actuator itself. In the actuator, you can change the bushing of its rod, and it will still run 300,000 kilometers without complaints. Let's start with the rear suspension. All versions have a torsion beam with very durable silent blocks. A pair of original silent blocks, 550450001R, will cost $120. The version with the 4-control chassis contains small silent blocks in the steering knuckles for engagement with the rods. The rear axle wheel bearings are integrated into the brake discs along with a magnetic ring for the ABS sensors. These discs cost between $70 and $250 each. The front suspension of the Renault Laguna 3 can hardly be called fragile, but sometimes, before a mileage of 200,000 kilometers, literally everything had to be changed. Starting with the silent blocks of the levers, ending with the support bearings and even the silent blocks of the subframe. Steel suspension arms, 545100-08R, ball joints, 4016-00004R, are replaced separately. A complete original lever assembly costs up to $150, and a ball assembly costs no more than $60. There are a lot of non-original offers. Prices are 4 times lower than for the original. You can also purchase silent blocks for levers separately, for $5 to $10 apiece. The original upper shock absorber mounts 543A03826R are very expensive, about $200 or more per set for one side. Good substitutes cost about $80. The price range for each front shock absorber, 543028512R, is approximately the same. The front stabilizer struts, 546180001R, last up to 80,000 kilometers, and the original costs about $35 a piece. Substitutes, from $8. After 200,000 kilometers, it is time to replace the drives. Don't forget about the bearing, 7,701,071,133 of the intermediate shaft to the right drive. Although this bearing can make quiet noise and rustle for a long time, original new drives with CV joints are very expensive. Even replacements cost about $300. Typically, owners are helped out by CV joints from auto wrecking yards. Sometimes there are non-original repair kits for crunchy CV joints, but at the moment they are not on sale. The quality of Laguna's paintwork is excellent. Body panels are galvanized. It happens that paint chips on the edges of arches, sills, and door corners. A layer of zinc is exposed under it, which retains its unchanged appearance for a very long time. However, this is only a layer of zinc. If it is sandblasted, then a red coating will appear there. The body metal will slowly begin to rust. But this will take a couple of years. The owners of these cars notice that the surface of the mudguards, which is covered with lockers, is slowly rusting. In such cases, the insides of the wheel arches can be cleaned, painted, and covered with a barrier anti-corrosion agent. Corrosion also slowly appears on the bottom under the plastic linings. Dirt and moisture readily collect there. But in general, the body of these Renaults will be fine for a quarter of a century even with not too careful and intensive use in an aggressive environment. Most Laguna 3s are equipped with halogen front optics with lenses, but the low beam is weak and becomes even weaker over time as the coating on the lens reflectors disappears. Versions with standard xenon come with a lens rotation function, but are very rare. Today, improving light is quite simple, thanks to LEDs. But questions may arise during technical inspection. Renault Laguna 3 has a problem with the rear windshield washer. The rear wiper works, but water flows from the front nozzles. The electric pump for the front and rear windshield washer is common, and the water supply to the front or rear window is switched by a small valve on the pump. It jams due to grains of sand or debris getting into it. In general, you can simply remove the electric pump from the tank, disassemble its valve and clean it. A new original pump, 6,001,549,444, costs about $30. There are many analogs starting at $10. To access the washer pump, you need to remove the front bumper. The reservoir is located on the front right, or raise the car on a lift. When you turn on the front windshield washer, the wipers have time to make a dry sweep before the water is applied to the glass, so that the nozzles quickly spray water, i.e. immediately after pressing the lever. You need to install a check valve on the water supply pipe to the nozzles. This valve will prevent water from flowing from the tube into the tank. A check valve from Toyota, 8,532,126,020, or any other analog is suitable for this. You can embed it into the section of the windshield washer tube located on the underside of the hood. The Laguna 3 with a servo-powered folding mirror housing sometimes produces a loud squeaking sound when folding and unfolding. Fortunately, the mechanism does not break or jam. And to get good access to the creaking hinge, you need to remove the main mirror cover. Next, the joint needs to be washed with something like brake cleaner or a more neutral detergent. And then, applying lubricant. The interior fan may howl and rustle after 200,000 kilometers. The new fan 272100001R is terribly expensive. It will cost about $600. However, a fan from Nissan Teana is ideal. The original costs about $200, 2722009W100. Substitutes cost up to $70. If you wish, you can restore your old fan by the indicated mileage. Both the carbon brushes and the commutator itself wear out thoroughly. Many Renault Laguna 3s were equipped with a keyless entry system. The components of this system in the doors have become and are becoming victims of moisture. It leads to corrosion of the two wires of the antenna, which is located in the handle itself. And also because of it, a simple tacked button dies. It is also located in the door handle. And in the door itself, opposite the handle, there is an infrared sensor with two lenses. These lenses are covered with a blank plug, under which moisture and dust get in. You need to remove the optical sensor by disassembling the door and clean the lenses under the plug. Problems with the antenna can usually be solved by restoring the wires. A rusted button can be replaced. They also recommend sticking foil into the handle under the antenna to strengthen the signal. All these repairs have to be carried out on each Laguna door handle. If the door locks do not open clearly on any version of the Laguna, then it is time to disassemble the locks and replace the motors in them. You can immediately buy them on Chinese marketplaces. The interior of the Renault Laguna is very average in terms of durability of materials. First of all, the sidewalls of the seats cracked in cars with a combined or leather interior. The upholstery was even replaced under warranty. By 200,000 kilometers, traces of use will appear on the door handles, gearshift lever knob and steering wheel braid. With age, the interior of the Laguna often begins to creak in all sorts of places. Over time, the dashboard develops problems with the LEDs, the backlight of the arrows, scales and display goes out. The instrument panel of this machine can be easily removed and disassembled. The LEDs that have gone out can be replaced with new ones. If the onboard computer display ripples, then soldering its contacts also helps. The problem with a partially or completely extinguished radio system display is solved in a similar way. Renault's steering cable is rather weak, but repairable. If the buttons on the steering wheel stop working, the driver's airbag malfunction indicator comes on, and there is still a rustling sound when the steering wheel is turned and the cable is torn. And if the error light comes on for the co-driver's airbag, then most likely the problem is in the connector under his seat. By the way, the sound signal, the horn, may disappear due to rotting of the horns themselves. And if problems arise with the cruise control, it does not work, errors appear on the clutch pedal sensor, then this sensor just needs to be changed. It costs $10 to $28,200,276,360. Also, due to its failure, the engine may not start.